We have finally got some news regarding Marvel Spider-Man 2, and this time it isn't a rumor or leak, but an official press release from Marvel themselves. This is all surrounding the brand new prequel comic for Spider-Man 2, which explores what Peter, Miles and MJ have been up to after the events of Spider-Man Miles Morales. The cover art for the comic looks really cool, having both Peter and Miles front and center, showcasing their new redesigned suits. But the real crux of it is what lies within the comic, as there are tons of small details and new pieces of information that might give us a better insight into how Spider-Man 2 will unfold, as well as a few villains that we might potentially see. It starts off with an interview between J. Jonah Jameson and MJ, who's forced to go onto the Just the Facts podcast to try and help boost sales of a recent book about war in Symkaria. The interview starts to go south as their ideologies begin to clash, and this is when both Peter and Miles smash through the wall whilst they're in the middle of a fight with the villain Tarantula. The art design for Tarantula is heavily inspired from the 2018 Spider-Geddon storyline, and I have to admit it looks pretty epic. And who knows, he could possibly be one of the villains that we will see in the upcoming sequel. Both Spider-Man are able to take him out shortly after, and then the trio head back to Peter's. This is where we see some of the core story elements unfold, such as how Miles is doing in school and how he is struggling to decide on which college he wants to go to. We also learn that MJ is shutting down the idea of moving in with Pete, which is putting a bit of a strain on their relationship. This brings me to the next point, that Pete has officially moved back to Queens, living in the house he grew up in. Now, why would this be important? Well, Queens wasn't a playable area in the first two installments, as these were primarily located and centered around Manhattan. So perhaps this is an indication that we'll be able to visit and explore Queens as a new region and area in game. They definitely need to expand or build upon the map, and pushing it out to Queens is a great idea. Another thing the narrative director wanted to explore in this comic is what if Peter, Miles and MJ had to team up against a new supervillain whose powers they didn't understand, and that's where the Hood comes into play. He is the boss of a hooded crime gang who our heroes find stealing cars. In the comics, the Hood is a villain who derives his magical powers from a demonic cloak and pair of boots. Although it appears that this gang is using some sort of magic, we find out that they're actually using stolen tech from the Tinkerer. This is allowing them to turn invisible using cloaking tech, forcing Miles and Pete to improvise and think of some clever ways to fight them, such as spilling paint over them and using the Web Blossom ultimate ability from the first game, which was a cool addition to see. After this, the trio then track down some members of the Hood's gang to find the boss himself, who they soon realize is only committing these crimes to try and find a cure for his mother's cancer. The pair engage in a fight with the Hood, which is brought to a halt by the death of the villain's mother. Peter and Miles console the man and let him grieve for a moment before they hand him over to the cops. Honestly, it's kind of a sad and I guess anticlimactic ending, but this comic isn't meant to be a huge spectacle. Its purpose is to solely fill the gaps and show some development for the characters leading up to Spider-Man 2. We get to catch up with MJ and Peter's relationship and see that they're still having some problems, but the most important part is that we get a good look at Peter and Miles working together as Spider-Man to take down a villain, something that the sequel is clearly gonna focus on. So where does this leave us for Spider-Man 2? Well, it's confirmed that Pete is now living in Queens, so assuming that that remains come the sequel, we will likely be able to visit or play through that part of New York City in game. We also learned that MJ and Pete, despite their patchy relationship, are still working together in the field, which could maybe, hopefully not, mean more MJ stealth missions. One of the most recent rumors enforced that this wasn't the case, but I guess we will have to wait and see. We also learned that college is playing on Miles' mind, and we find out at the end that he will likely end up picking ESU. So depending on how the timeline plays out in Marvel Spider-Man 2, we could see this play a narrative role for Miles, as he faces the classic Spider-Man trope of leading two completely separate lives. Although the comic doesn't give us a whole heap of intel, it's at least something official from the direct source being Marvel, compared to the loose-ended rumors from 4chan. But it's not all that Insomniac gave us, as they also announced that PS5 players can finally get their hands on the remastered version of Marvel Spider-Man. For first-time buyers, it's gonna cost you $50 on the PlayStation Store, whereas people who already own the PS4 version or Game of the Year editions can get the game for $10. It's a bit overdue, but better late than never. The only differences between the editions is that the remastered will be more optimized for next gen, having improved resolution and performance. And of course, the total recasting of Peter Parker to make him look more like Tom Holland. We are getting closer and closer to that much anticipated PlayStation showcase, where we will hopefully get to see a trailer or some gameplay for Spider-Man 2. But until then, click this video here if you want to see 10 new features that would make the game great. I hope you enjoyed this one, and as always, take care.